All right, so with your military background, how have you transitioned that into I don't know, just kind of comedy in general? Because you've done 90 mics in 60 days, I know that for sure.
Well, when I first got out of the military, what I was looking to do was find something that I could be passionate about that didn't quite have the same consequences. When you look at military life, actions have consequences, good and bad. And you can end up with some very untenable consequences. In comedy, if I do well on stage or if I do poorly on stage, nobody's going to live or die. You know, I might have a bruised ego, but nobody's losing limbs, nobody's getting burned beyond recognition. There's not a catastrophic destruct that's going to happen if I have a bad night in comedy.
You spoke earlier before we turned on the camera. You talked about risk assessment. Did you assess the risk of like other hobbies, or because I figured like when you're thinking something, you're just analyzing it. So did you assess comedy like, yeah, sure.
Well, when I look at comedy, when I look at the rest of the risk, life is risk. You walk out the door, you could get hit by a car. You could get hit by a bicycle. You could get hit by a kid throwing a rock. You could have a stray bullet come winging through. Probably not. Most people don't stay sequestered in their house just because they're scared of what might happen when they go out. They look at it and go, normal, everyday risk, and they go about the business. But there are some things that people, may or may not agree with. In my case, I did extreme sports. I flew hang gliders, I bungee jumped, I whitewater rafted. I will admit that yes, I did bribe a tram driver to let me ride on top of a tram car in high winds back when I was in my 20s. Maybe not the brightest thing I've ever done. But I looked at it and went, for me, the risk of what might happen, I'll accept that for the experience that I'm going to gain. And so what is somebody's risk tolerance? I don't know if you would ever want to fly a hang glider.
No, it sounds. I think the tolerance. I mean, I would, but I think tolerance comes with experience and consequences. Because I think once you touch the stove the first time, you're like, I don't like that consequence anymore. So have you experienced some consequences from like these risks? You're like, I'm a rally back a little bit.
Well, it's one of those things where, from just the way I was raised, I grew up in a military family, and you can do almost anything you want if you're willing to accept the consequences. But that doesn't mean blindly accepting risk. If you're looking at, I wanted to go fly hang gliders. I'm not buying a hang glider off of eBay and jumping off the side of a mountain. I'm actually going through training. I'm inspecting my equipment. I'm making sure my equipment is airworthy. I'm not going to risk having a glider fall apart on me after launching a mountainside. That's a risk that's not acceptable to me. We have had ladies or gentlemen who have tried to buy a hang glider off of eBay, and if it's got ultraviolet ray damage, if it's not airworthy and they don't realize it, now you've got a much higher risk of an accident with a hang glider.
Do you still approach it the same way as you did in your 20s, or when did you start going back, or do you still have that same approach of I'm gonna pay someone to get on to get on top of their car or something like that?
Well, back when I was in my 20s, I knew the tram very well, and I knew that it was a safe tram. Now, would I ever get up there with a belly band on? It's just a little cable latched around the waist. I might still, but I look at, would I go and just rig up my own bungee cords and jump off a bridge with them? No. No, I'm going to go through somebody who is certified to inspect the cords. I actually refused to do a bungee jump once. I had 20 some odd jumps under my belt, and one of my ankle locks slipped on a jump. And the guy says, okay, you ready for your next jump? And I said, no, not until the ankle locks get adjusted. He says, they're fine, they're fine, they're fine. I'm going, no, they're not.
What is that? What do you mean the ankle locks? It just wasn't secure, like it wasn't tight?
My one foot had slipped. I'd felt it slip on the previous jump. And it's like, okay, I am not jumping again until that ankle has been re-secured. I was jumping with ankle bands that day. It's like, I'm not going to jump again until that ankle is re-secured. And he's telling me it's fine, and my reaction was, no, this is my life, that thing slipped. I said, and I will not take this next jump until that's adjusted.
Doing like north of 20 jumps for bungee jumping, because it just seems like whiplash. Is the whole thing just whiplash?
No. No, the thing is, when your weight gets on those bungee cords, as it starts to stretch, it's a very gradual release of the tension. It's a gradual slowing down. It's not the sudden stop at the end.
And how did you feel when you felt your foot was loose on one of those, like when you went prior?
It was instantaneous. Instincts clicked in. It's like, okay, you've got a loose ankle here. One ankle's still good. The other ankle feels loose. You can feel where your foot slipped. It's like, okay, I can get pulled up safely from this bungee jump, but I'm not jumping again until that's resecured. And having to advocate for yourself and go, no, something's wrong here. You're not the one who's going to do this next jump. I'm the one who's going to be bailing off of these bands on my ankles. I need to fix this. And if it's not fixed, I'm not going. And sometimes you have to take a hard line and go, listen, your equipment here is all good. The jump master is good. Everything else looks safe. Here's what's changed. And when you look at a risk and go, okay, what has changed? If nothing had changed from that first jump to the next jump, fine. But I felt that ankle slip. So now I've got additional information. Now I've got to reassess the risk. And if I'm jumping with a loose ankle strap, I've got a higher risk. So at this point in time, I'm stopping this, fix the band. Okay, now we can do more stunt jumps, but not prior to that getting fixed.
What's as far as is this kind of still a thing you do? You know, these Caucasian activities, or these, like, do you still do these?
I've never heard them called Caucasian activities before.
I just don't really see colored people. Just
you got to see the military guys then.
Yeah.
We actually had to do safety briefings for all of our military guys. You hand in a whole list of actions you'd like to take, whether it's flying civil aircraft, gliders, hang gliders, scuba diving. I did so many of them, my one commander looked at me and said, go to see your group commander. He's going to have to sign off on what your background is.
I think I went hang gliding once, but I did in Dominican Republic, so it wasn't no waivers. It's just like, all right, yeah, $48, just go hike up a mountain and just jump off. I think that's the same thing. Do you jump off?
Actually, you'll be wearing a harness, typically either a pod harness or
I was attached to someone's chest. And,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, and then they have the straps that are actually hanging from your back. So you've got you got your hang straps and you've got your D-rings, which are basically how you hook into a glider. You have people who think, oh, I'm just going to jump off the cliff, or I'm going to run off the cliff and I'm going to hang on to the handlebars. Now your control frame, which is the triangle shaped bars, you've got the down tubes, which are the metal uprights of the triangle, and then you've got your base bar. It's not hanging on. You're actually physically hooked in with straps into your glider. And one of the things we do before flying, you do what's called a hang check, which is you're down on your base bar, you're looking over your shoulder, you're checking to make sure your carabiner is secured, and you're making sure your straps are secured. There have been cases where guys have taken off, you can see them on YouTube, they'll run off the edge, somebody didn't do a hang check, and somebody is about to go. There's a couple, the risks of that are bad. Somebody's probably dying. There's a couple ones where the guys have survived. There's one where you see this guy hanging on for dear life and his pilot's trying to get him down close enough to the ground where it's not going to kill him to fall. There are risks. Do you want this risk? Most people look at it and go, absolutely not. I'm perfectly fine getting up on a comedy stage. But we also have ladies or gentlemen who go, I'm scared of speaking in public. You're not getting me on that comedy stage. There's no way.
I think once, because yesterday I was at a show and people was like, you're so crazy for going up there. I was like, sometimes I think it's overhyped how much congratulations we get, because it's just like, at the end of the day, once you know a bomb, it's just kind of we think people are going to think about this forever, but it's just like, people forget right away, so it's just like, it's not really, it's just, I tried this joke out, it doesn't work, next time it works. What is it? So are you still in the military, or when did you retire from it?
No, I retired in May of 2019, actually fully retired 1 July of 2019, and I've been doing stand-up comedy pretty much since I was on what they call terminal leave, which is your last little bit of time off before you're officially out of the military.
And what branch were you in?
I was Air Force.
Okay, so how do you feel? Because I thought my sister's a Air Force officer, or she was. She got out because you make more money other places. I guess, I don't know, it's just like, it's just like she got to work for PayPal and Morgan Stanley, so it's like, it's fun, but like, how is it now being out? Or do you get all these new opportunities, or are you kind of just like, I just kind of want to do what I like to do? How's that?
I miss being military, I really do. I grew up in the Navy, I trained with the Army, I spent my main career in the Air Force, and so for 50 years for me, that's all I knew. That was my family. That military is a different culture altogether. One of the things people don't realize, one of the largest undeclared minorities in existence in America are the military brats. You know, one of my series of jokes that you've heard, I went to 6 different schools before first grade. Voted most likely to be the new kid. One of the comments you'll hear among military brats is most of your classmates, they know how to say good morning in one language. We probably have had to say good morning in about 8 different languages.
So your parents were also military?
Mm-hmm. My father was Navy.
Okay. How does that influence your decision to like join the Air Force as far as coming? Was it kind of just kind of like you see the options, what the benefits are, and you just pick Air Force? Or did you have pressure to join the Navy?
My father asked if I would consider joining the Navy, and I told him for half a second I did, and the answer was no. Here's where you have got something that's a little different in sailing tradition than it is in Navy tradition. Among sailors, women are bad luck. Now, you're not going to hear that in the Navy, but sailing tradition, and even when I was growing up, my father had all daughters, so he was always catching grief for, you have 3 girls, no sons. But women in the sailing community were always bad luck, with the exception of the captain's wife. So a woman on board a ship was considered to be trouble. That was something I grew up with. It was something I heard growing up, because obviously I grew up on Navy bases where, yes, there was still, at that time, a large part of sailing traditions that were still openly commented on. And so, having dealt with that growing up, I did not have any desire to deal with it as an adult.
Do you think those superstitions actually hold back females in the Navy?
I couldn't speak to that for the modern Navy. Back in just post World War II, my mother had wanted to join the Navy. And you've probably heard the reference, I don't know how much it plays as a joke anymore. It used to be an insult. Your mama wears combat boots.
Not my generation, no.
Yeah. When my mother wanted to join the Navy, and she had a college degree, I realize it was a little unusual for her time frame, but she had a college degree, and she said she wanted to join the Navy, and her brothers told her only whores joined the military, and if she did, they'd disown her.
Really? Is that rough?
That was pretty much normal for her generation. That was pretty much the normal attitude. The odd thing is, we talk about women in the draft now, that's back in the press. In World War II, they didn't draft females because they had enough volunteers for the nurse corps. So you've got this strange dichotomy. Women have been in the military since time immemorable. You can actually see in the Civil War, your medical physical to get in was show the sides, show you had at least 3 teeth so you could tear the paper off your powder cartridge, and shake hands to show that you had a trigger finger. That was the physical. And so there are documented cases of women who dressed in men's clothing, went in and fought in the Civil War.
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't really hear too much about females in the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you have a personal interest to kind of learn this stuff? Because you seem like you know a lot on history just in general. Is that just a hobby, or is it school, or how does this work?
I'm a hack historian.
Okay.
Well, part of it was when I was growing up, the reading programs we used to have, reading about Sarah Edmonds in 2nd grade. She was one of the females who dressed as a guy and went to war. Yeah, that was just what she did. I grew up at an interesting time in America. There was a whole lot of changing in women's roles. Most guys nowadays, and guys generic there, don't realize it took a class action lawsuit for women to be able to have a credit card in their own name. Women weren't considered to have an income sufficient enough, so they had to either have their husband's card or their father. It took a class action lawsuit in the 1960s for women to be able to have their own credit card in their own name.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, it kind of just makes it seem other countries are so behind on times. Because when I was in Dominican Republic, it's kind of times the father had to be present to sign the birth certificate of the child, or the child would not be registered.
Really?
Yeah, that's kind of like the joke my mom plays, because her birthday is, she was born like April 30th or April 28th, but her paperwork wasn't registered until May 1st. So that's her legal birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff as, if you're a female, you cannot get your tubes tied or anything of that degree unless you have your husband or your father sign off on it. So it seems like other countries are going through what America went in the 60s. Maybe. So do you, was this kind of like a new interest being a buff on all this, or were you aware of this while you were in the military and you're like, why is this still going on? Like, why?
Most of this, my parents gave me a very good education. That's one of the things, they pulled no punches. I was the only kid in my high school who actually knew about the Japanese internment camps in World War II. I knew about the medical experimentation that the government had done on its citizens from time to time. And one of my teachers asked, she says, why? Why did your parents do this? And a whole lot of it comes down to, can you critically evaluate? Can you critically think and make an informed decision? Okay, I've seen enough countries that I look at it and go, for all of our flaws in America, there are very few places that offer what America has. There's a reason why people are trying to get to America. You know, I was down in Venezuela back in 1994 with a friend of mine. His family had to flee the country. His little brother is still stuck in Venezuela. And you look at what Venezuela, which had been this vibrant, booming economy, vibrant culture, all the rest, and now they're eating the animals out of the zoo. Women who had been doctors are now having to prostitute themselves. They have an immigration issue because you cannot get food into Venezuela enough to feed the population. You have a starving population. It took 12 years to destroy that nation. And that was the population legally elected Hugo Chavez. And it took 12 years for him to destroy Venezuela.
He was like a dictator, I'm assuming? Mm-hmm. I don't know nothing about Venezuela, but that sounds horrible.
He is now dead. Unfortunately, his successors have not been able to take care of anything. Like I said, it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking watching what happened to Venezuela, because it was a beautiful country with absolutely wonderful people, fantastic culture. And unfortunately, the belief in socialism, that socialism would make it all better, and it doesn't. It does not.
Is there other countries you've seen and you're kind of, like say go to Europe, and you're like, oh, I like this part of this country, I like a free healthcare or something of that degree, or do you think, I love America's system, it's perfect as it is?
There is no perfect system in the world, but that's why we've got brains. Figure out how to solve the problem. The problem that you can also run into, though, the difference between idealism and realism. Ideally, every single person would have all the food, medical, whatever. Realistically, do we have ladies and gentlemen who don't want to work? Yeah, we got that too. So you've got these extremes in the, okay, can you as an individual bring yourself to a point where you can bootstrap yourself out of your circumstances? Give you a bit of an issue here. Now, I was not poverty-stricken as a child. Absolutely was not. I did not starve as a child. My mother starved from time to time when she was a child. Did not know that until, now my grandfather had 16 children, one of which was adopted out, and he adopted one. He had a huge garden. That's how he fed his family. When my mother found out that I also was a gardener, she asked me to put in a spare row of carrots. And she said, if you ever find a child stealing carrots out of your garden, found out she had been stealing carrots when she was a child out of one of the farmer's gardens. That's how she ate. And she asked me, she said, would you just put in an extra row of carrots and let them have whatever they need? I said, if ever I see a child stealing out of my garden and they need food, I said, I will find a way to make sure they're fed.
So as far as, kind of pulling it together, because I hear some situations, and I'm always open to like both sides, just, why would you want to make minimum wage as a dishwasher when, the assistance that they're giving out is, much more? Do you believe, for the bootstrap type of deal, do you believe like families should find their way out of the situation, or is it okay to receive assistance from the government?
Here's where I see a lot of difference. We had a gentleman back in New Mexico, this was back in the 80s, and they were doing a radio broadcast. It was right before the holidays, kind of like right now. And it was a gripe about your job. If you've got the worst job, call us up, we'll buy you lunch. And the first guy on the radio program says, I know what the worst job is because I have it. It's no job at all. He says, the company I work for is having to do layoffs. I happen to be one that was cut. My boss would give me an excellent reference, but I don't know how I'm going to find Christmas presents for my kids or even put food on the table. To the radio announcer's credit, he put a stop to the show right there. He says, sir, I'm ending this competition. I'm gonna go to a commercial break. When we come back, I want you to have your resume ready. He says, we will get you a job by the end of the day, and if we don't, I'm hiring you here at the station. And for the rest of the season, we're gonna help people who want to find jobs, get jobs. The gentleman had been a heavy equipment operator. He was hired within an hour. In my case, my my grandfather was a blacksmith. My father picked cotton when he was young. He enlisted in the Navy. He actually had a very successful career. 30 years in the Navy, he's a master electrician. In my case, I started working at 14. I was mowing yards and sewing doll clothes and all the rest prior to that. But my first official go-in job interview, get hired, was at 14. I wore a $1.25 dress from Goodwill to a congressional interview trying to get to military school. Okay, I still own that dress. Don't ever forget where you came from. Nobody says it's easy. It doesn't have to be. Are there times when a hand to help somebody out of an accident, somebody has to go on workman's comp. They broke a leg, broke an arm, broke a back, whatever. Yes, they need a hand up. For ladies and gentlemen who are going, okay, the company shut down, COVID destroyed how many businesses? There are a lot of ladies and gentlemen who lost their jobs. They need a hand to stopgap. Are they back out there going, okay, I'm looking for a job now? I walked in to get my truck repaired, and the guy at the Ford Motor Company looked at me. He says, "You want a job?" He says, "I'm 6 months deep in applications. I'm looking for somebody with a work ethic. I'll train. I will train people." And so it's always interesting to see who's willing to work, who wants to work, who wants that level of responsibility. There's a lot of people who go, I don't want to take that much responsibility.
Well, I think it's because, a big thing is going on. It's just like we have all these jobs and people don't want to work. Well, at the same time, people are always criticizing the customer service industry, saying, go get a better job, go find a better job, go to improve your situation. And people are looking for a job, but they don't get that. I don't know, I just feel like it's like a double-edged sword. It's just kind of like you want to find a better job to improve your life, but then the only thing available right now is, say, like entry level, making $40,000 a year. So it's kind of yes and no. I don't know.
So when I started out, I got $3.33 an hour. That was minimum wage back then. I was washing dishes, cooking fast food, mopping floors. I ended up moving up to be a busser at the shopping mall. I finally got hired in as a hostess at a restaurant that paid $4.25. But one of the guys was looking at me and says, okay, you've commanded an Air Force squadron, but you still know how to clean latrines and wash floors and all the rest. Yeah, I know what it takes to run an entire restaurant if I had to. Every single job has merit, and there's a point where it all seems to come back together. Are you prepared? Do you know how to sterilize the dishes? Do you know how to clean a floor correctly? Do you know how to cook the food correctly? Do you know how to make sure that the oils in the fryers are appropriate, clean, the food's going to taste good? Can you safely cook all of this? We see a lot of ladies and gentlemen who don't realize that all of these low-level jobs that you start out with can build into something much greater. Can you go straight in and find the higher level job? The big question is, are you qualified? Can you handle it? Military, this is one of the things I loved about the military. You had to demonstrate you could perform at that higher level before you got promoted to it. Then you were set up for success and not set up for failure. When we see young ladies and gentlemen who are set up for failure because they don't have the basic skill set they need for that next level. If somebody wants to do it, what skills are you going to need? How do we build you to that? Kind of like being a comic.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of seems more like that kind of adds insight for me as far as more people wanting that immediate gratification type of deal. The 5-month comic is the most confident comic of all time, at least in my opinion. People making merch first month in comedy. But how does that like kind of translate to now as far as, how does it work for comedy for you? Because you're doing, like, your goal is 1,000 mics in your first 3 years.
Yes. I knew that I was coming into comedy with a whole lot of baggage. You're talking to somebody who checked her sense of humor at the door 30 years ago, and now I've got to find it again. And the realization that this is not going to be quick, it is not going to be easy, I've got to put in the work. I probably have got more work to put in than most of our young comics, because I've got the baggage of having been a former, a formal command briefer, which is straight-faced, talking fast, and no sense of humor.
You know, I can kind of see from like, from my first year in comedy before, because even you mentioned it didn't really have much rhythm at first.
Mm-hmm.
When you gain rhythm, you're learning a two-step, What are some things that so do you think kind of just, I don't know, learning rhythm, is that like a hard thing to feel more comfortable on stage?
Well, it's the showing emotion on stage for me. I'm coming out of a career field where you don't show emotion. It's not appropriate. To a career field where you have to be able to convey that emotion and let your audience be part of it. When you look at the dark comedy theater, why is it dark? Well, people are laughing at things that they might think in regular life, but it's inappropriate to laugh at in real life. Can they get that catharsis out in the audience and not be judged for laughing at a comic's joke? And so, we watch the build-up. Your first time at the mic, getting over your fear of the mic, learning how to use a mic on stage, learning how to do your first couple minutes of material, starting out as a host, moving into being an opener, moving into being a feature, building up enough material where you're a headliner, having that rhythm, that sense of the audience, the ebb and flow of the act, feeling that connection with the audience, finding out what actually is funny, what makes people laugh, what brings them together. And all of that, you are correct. There's a rhythm to it, there's a music to it, there's a flow to it. And when you catch that, I forget which comic it was out of Dying Laughing, he talks about, doing stand-up comedy. It's like being in the ocean. It's like riding a surfboard. You're out there just swinging it out against the, trying to get out there, and you finally get up on the board, you catch the wave, and then all of a sudden you're in the tunnel, and it's whoosh, joke, laugh, whoosh, joke, laugh.
Heckler shark.
Exactly.
We're kind of wrapping this up, like in the 2 minutes left. What would you say to like the person that's coming from your background, where it's kind of not showing emotion, to go into something so vulnerable as comedy?
Be open to it. If this is something you want to do, does it help on the other side of military service, becoming a civilian, where you're taking a regimented lifestyle and now having to put a far more human face on it. And it's definitely worth, even if you don't want to do it full time, try it. Just get out there and try it and see what it's like to be on that stage, to try something new, try something fresh, and find another form of vividness in life.
Vividness. I like that word. All right, cool. I appreciate your time. And great chatting. Fade to black. All right.